While religion have been historically suppressed and restricted, their teachings and institutions have been conveniently used by those in control at that time. Minasan konnichiwa, and welcome to Let's Ask Shogo. In Japan, it's very common for someone's legitimate activities or businesses to be criticized as a shukyo religion, and that he or she is deceiving their believers to pay them money. For example, right after the membership features were released in Japan, and many famous YouTubers started using the system, there were people saying they're scammers who are taking money from their followers. Another example is if you look up the famous names of entrepreneurs in Japan on Google, there are tons of articles claiming that their businesses are just like a new cult religion. These might be some extreme examples, but the word shukyo religion in general has a negative image among Japanese people, and it's a topic we all avoid talking about. Why are religion and fraud treated almost the same among Japanese people? So today, I will introduce the 3 events in Japanese history that I believe might have affected how Japanese people react to religions. The 3 reasons will get more and more critical and important towards the end. And also in the last chapter, I will talk about why Japanese people who don't like religions still carry on many religious activities. However, before I start, I want to make it very clear that Japanese people do not have hatred towards a certain religion. The main topic today is about why Japanese people feel so much resistance towards religions in general, and how this word started to walk on its own. In this channel, you can take a closer look at Japanese traditional culture, tips on traveling to Kyoto, and social problems in Japan. So learners and lovers of Japanese language and culture, be sure to subscribe to enjoy more content. それでは本日も参りましょう。1. Suppression of Buddhism and banning on Christianity. Since ancient times, there's always been a general belief that religion is something that causes trouble in Japan. This was born out of the history of oppression of Buddhism and Christianity. Buddhism was brought into Japan in the 6th century from China and Korea. Originally, it was applied as a system to unify the few hundred small countries that existed at that time. Japan originally had a religion called Shinto, but it did not have systematic teachings and rituals like Buddhism, so it was not enough to govern the people. However, Buddhism quickly began to cause problems. Almost all Japanese aristocrats came to learn and believe in Buddhism, so the Buddhist monks began to arm themselves and try to control the political system to their demand. The monk warriors threatened the nobles if they didn't obey, they will be punished by God. From the Kamakura period, when the samurai warriors started to rule Japan, many unique Japanese Buddhist sects were born. Buddhism, which were previously limited to those who were in the highest ranks with power and money, quickly spread to the general public. The distinctive feature of these new sects was that they taught the people that anyone could go to heaven without any severe training. This was in order to save the people suffering from the wars and famines caused by the samurai and nobles. However, this turned Buddhism into something even more troublesome. The poor, who began to believe that they would be saved with a single word of prayer, frequently started rebellions against their upper-class rulers. These rebels were eventually crushed by military force and political measures by the 3 most famous samurai warlords during the Sengoku era: Oda Nobunaga, Toyotomi Hideyoshi, and Tokugawa Ieyasu. After the Edo period, the activities of the Buddhists were completely restricted, and they became an organization that only managed the family registers and funerals of the local residents. Then next, how and why was Christianity suppressed? Christianity is said to have been introduced to Japan by Francisco Xavier. a Spanish missionary who arrived in Kagoshima Prefecture in the 16th century. Francisco Xavier increased the number of Christians in Japan through his activities, and many powerful samurai joined the church and became Kirishitan daimyo, Christian daimyo. Perhaps the people were seeking salvation in Christianity, because Buddhism, which they have long believed in, began to be suppressed. However, the real reason why Oda Nobunaga, who was the political leader at that time, allowed Christian missionaries to spread their religion was to make it easier for him to obtain the guns that the merchants who accompanied the missionaries had. In fact, as it soon became possible to produce guns domestically in Japan, the next political leader, Toyotomi Hideyoshi, began to suppress the Christians. And by the time the Edo period, started by Tokugawa Ieyasu, religion was completely controlled by the shogunate, and Christianity was forbidden altogether. Many Christian rebellions were suppressed by military force, and some were cruelly executed or deported. In order for the Tokugawa shogunate to end the long war period and to establish a completely unified country, Christianity was a threat to the samurai government. Thus, both Buddhism and Christianity were completely controlled by politics, and it was imprinted in the minds of the people that disobeying them and practicing religion was absolute evil. 2. World War II and Kokka Shinto. I just explained that Buddhism and Christianity have been historically oppressed. But in fact, after Japan westernized due to the Meiji Restoration, Shintoism also came to have a big influence on Japan. In the latter half of the 19th century, ships from the US Navy were arriving at Japan's ports one after another, pressuring the country to open its borders. In addition to its politics related to religion, the Tokugawa shogunate also placed significant restrictions on diplomacy and overseas travel in order to protect their absolute control. The US, which wanted to use Japan's ports as a water and food supply point, showed its overwhelming military power and newest weaponry and forced Japan to open its ports to the world. With this event, Japan entered its second major civil war period, known as the Bakumatsu period. There was a clash between the forces that wanted to learn from the West and modernize as soon as possible, and the forces that wanted to preserve the samurai culture and fight against foreign nations. As a result, the forces that were trying to promote Westernization obtained the latest weapons from European countries, which led to the destruction of the shogunate and the establishment of the new Westernized Meiji government. The Meiji government had only one goal: to Westernize Japan as quickly as possible and put it on an equal footing with other countries in the international community. In the process of striving for a wealthy and powerful nation, it was believed that Japan needed a religion similar to the monotheistic religions believed in by the European countries to unify the nation and to strengthen the government's control. As a result, a new form of Shinto called Kokka Shinto was born, which worshipped the emperor as god. As I explained earlier, Shinto was originally a teaching to respect, appreciate, and coexist with the gods of nature. The emperor was originally just a representative of the gods, but this new religion positioned him as an absolute god and taught that Japanese people must always obey to his will. However, as you all know, this religion planted the false teaching that Japan is a special country chosen by the gods and the Japanese people, which would later lead Japan into the terrible wars of invasion. After the war, Japan's education system was renewed, and it was forbidden to teach about religions in schools, so that horrible teachings such as Kokka Shinto will never spread again. Religious education was no longer provided in schools, and the widespread perception that people during the wartime Japan were brainwashed by the government with horrible religious ideologies further reduced the understanding of religion and increased the hatred of it. This is how the image of religion as something that causes war and something that brainwashes believers spread among the Japanese people. I was brought up in Hiroshima, so I especially received thorough education on war. And since I was a child, I've had a strong sense of fear and disgust for Japan in the first half of the 20th century. 3. Social crimes committed by cults. I believe that you have now understood that throughout Japanese history, the image of religion has already become quite negative. But there was more that made it even worse. It was the terrorist incidents, such as the Tokyo sarin attack in the subway caused by the cult of Oum Shinrikyo in the 1990s. Oum Shinrikyo was a Japanese cult founded by Asahara Shogo, who used parts of the teachings of various religions to teach his believers that violence was acceptable to those who disobeyed his doctrines. In 1995, about 7 years after the organization was established, toxic sarin gas was sprayed by the believers in the subways of Tokyo, now called the Tokyo Metro. 14 people died and 6,300 people were injured. It was a terrorist attack, unlike anything that ever happened in which chemical weapons were used indiscriminately in a major city, and it shocked the whole world. Even after 26 years after the incident, there are people still suffering from the after effects of the poison. In 2000, Oum Shinrikyo was dismantled, and in 2018, the capital punishment against 13 formal cult leaders were executed. However, there are still a number of organizations that worship the deceased Asahara, and it is said that they are gaining about 100 new believers every year. As this incident was widely covered by the media and taught in schools, the image of religion being something dangerous became even more deeply rooted in the minds of Japanese people. Throughout this video, I've explained the reasons why Japanese people have come to feel resistance towards religions. However, the Japanese still go to shrines on New Year's, hold funerals at temples, and even celebrate Christmas. Why are these events that are clearly related to religion accepted? There is no absolute answer, but I personally believe that Japanese people have come to think of religion and religious activities as separate things throughout history. While religion have been historically suppressed and restricted, their teachings and institutions have been conveniently used by those in control at that time. For example, during the Edo period, the activities of Buddhist forces were greatly restricted, but they were entrusted with the management of family registers and funeral events. People began to be treated as Buddhists, regardless of whether they actually believed in Buddhism or not. Also, although I introduced Kokka Shinto as a religion in this video, it was actually not promoted as a religion at that time. Surprisingly, the formal constitution issued by the Meiji government contains a sentence that guarantees the freedom of religion. This was to prevent the people from protesting against the enforcement of beliefs, and the government promoted Kokka Shinto as common sense as the Japanese, rather than a religion. Like this, I believe that the current sense of Japanese people has been created through the historical repetition of using religious teachings and systems as means to control and manipulate people while denying religion itself. What do you think about my opinion? It would be great if you can let me know in the comments. Then lastly, today's conclusion. There are mainly 3 historical events that led to religion being seen as the same as fraud in Japan. 1. Suppression of Buddhism and banning on Christianity. Buddhism was brought into Japan in the 6th century to utilize their teachings and systems for governing the people. Eventually, Buddhism started to cause trouble because Buddhist forces started to gain too much power and because commoners started to cause rebellions, believing they would be able to go to heaven by chanting certain phrases, etc. The 3 most famous samurai warlords of the Sengoku era suppressed activities of Buddhists with military power and political measures. By the Edo period, Buddhism became just an organization that managed family registers and funeral events. Christianity came to Japan in the 16th century by missionaries from Spain. Although many people started to believe in it, the true purpose of the leaders at that time was to obtain the weaponry from Europe. So from the Edo period, it was completely banned and Christians were cruelly executed or deported. 2. World War II and Kokka Shinto. After Japan westernized and the new Meiji government was established, it took various measures to modernize and westernize as quickly as possible to catch up to foreign powers. One of the things that the government did was to try to create a monotheism religion, and they created a new religion called Kokka Shinto that worshipped the emperor as an absolute god. However, this religion planted a false teaching of Japan is a special country chosen by the gods and the Japanese people, which would later lead Japan into terrible wars of invasion. 3. Social crimes committed by cults. The terrorist incidents, such as the Tokyo Sarin attack in the subway caused by the cult Om Shinrikyo in the 1990s, made the image of religions even worse. It was a terrorist attack unlike no other in which chemical weapons were used indiscriminately in the major city, and it brought shock to the world. The reason why Japan still has religious events such as New Year's prayers at shrines and funerals at temples is because religion and religious events are considered to be separate things among Japanese people. Throughout history, the leaders of Japan have utilized religious doctrines and teachings to govern the people, but at the same time suppressed and regulated the belief in religion itself. So that's it for today. Thank you very much for watching. If this video helped you to deepen your understanding towards Japanese history and the values among Japanese people, please hit the like button to help me boost this video to more people. And our goal is to achieve 1 million subscribers by January 2023, so your help would mean a lot. And please check out our sub-channel and membership through the link inside the description box. Thanks again, and I'll see you in my next video. どうもありがとうございました。